Hey, that time at work, kind of. It's been a rough month for OnlyFans. The subscription service connecting content creators directly with their supporters had emerged over the last year as one of the platforms of choice for sex workers to self-produce pictures and video, as it provides them with a creator-driven subscription model without having to mess with all the heinous bullshit sex workers normally have to deal with thanks to puritanical legislation and the failure of FOSTA SESTA that does them more harm than good. OnlyFans reported a monthly payout figure of approximately $300 million to over 1 million users, easily making it the most popular platform for creators to distribute content both sexually explicit and fussily chaste. But in that good old American tradition of doing more harm than good, OnlyFans announced in August that they would no longer support sexually explicit content on their platform beginning in October. The company cited blowback from banks who were uncomfortable processing payments that were in any way connected to nips, tips, and/or drips. OnlyFans founder and CEO Tim Stokely, who has so far foolishly not changed his name to Tip Strokely, said they had no choice but to ban pornographic content from their platform so that the electronic payments they make to creators, completely divorced from any information about how that money was earned, would be less embarrassing, I guess. Like, seriously, the reason given was reputational risk to the banks. Banks being businesses that, as we all know, have a really good reputation otherwise. And apparently, they can tell which OnlyFans payments were for sex stuff and which ones were for baking tips from struggling stand-up comedians. And if anything should be banned, we ban them. I mean, obviously, it's that second thing, am I right? Am I right, people? To be clear, it shouldn't matter whether the revenue passing through these banks are totally anonymous numbers on a spreadsheet or stapled to a stack of meticulous line item receipts detailing every moist, trembling deposit. Banks shouldn't get to decide they're too good for your cash. If you walk into a bank with a dirty sock full of ripped money, they have to take it. If I take one money and I tear that money in half, and stick that smaller half of the money in my mouth, and chew on that money, and swallow the money, I can take the uneaten half of the money to any bank, and they are legally required to give me a new money. It's true, I do this all the time. My turds look like a chia pet. It's pretty gross. Like all turds. Also, money is fake. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that, but it's a thing we made up. And banks are lucky we, for some reason, pretend money isn't fake. And that they need a house where people rent space for their pretend money to live. So as long as no laws were broken, banks super shouldn't be able to say one solitary word about how their customers earned the money they're depositing. Or whether it's chewed up, or ripped, or quite obviously was pooped out at some point. Because if you eat half and deposit the other half, you can still deposit the poop half later and get double money. It's all in my financial advice book, Literally Shitting Money by Cody K. Johnston. I lost so much money publishing that. The point is, it's like super weird that these banks would be afraid of embarrassment or have shame for the first time in ever. But it turns out that this isn't even close to new. Weirdly enough, banks specifically have a long and upsetting history of icing out sex work, even if it means doing blatantly discriminatory stuff. Back in 2014, Chase suddenly closed down bank accounts for hundreds of porn stars without giving a single good reason for it. And there were rumors that the DOJ had actually ordered them to do it. Many financial investors have morality clauses built in that prevent them from working with any sex-related startups. Just this year, MasterCard rewrote their rules to be more restrictive to sex workers. We could, and will, do an entire episode about the quaint Victorian sensibilities of banks and governments. But for now, unsurprisingly, news of the looming pornography ban left many sex workers feeling betrayed by a platform they had played such an integral part in establishing. Not one single damn soul on this violently spinning globe of land and sea had ever heard of OnlyFans until sex workers began producing content for it. It's like when they kicked Richard Donner off of Superman 2, or when they tore Justice League from the bosom of Zack Snyder and tossed it to Joss Whedon, like a suckling babe to a hungry lion, or when they recast Victoria with Bryce Dallas Howard after Rachel Levesque had already played her for 2 whole Twilight movies. That one really stung. Have some decorum, OnlyFans. Dance with the person who brought you. the Twilight films. In fact, as several people with memories longer than a goldfish have pointed out, issuing blanket bans targeting sexually explicit material on platforms that were raised from obscurity by sex workers looking for safe and reasonably non-exploitative avenues to distribute their material has worked out terribly for websites in the past. Do you remember Tumblr? The once popular microblogging site issued a statewide ban on all sexually explicit content in December 2018, after a child pornography incident briefly saw the Tumblr app removed from Apple's iOS App Store. The content targeted by the ban included any images of genitalia or female-presenting nipples, a phrase which indicates that Tumblr both understands gender is a societal construct and is totally cool with enforcing bizarre double standards based on your choice of pronoun. Speaking of the kaleidoscope of appropriate situations in which the word bizarre would be appropriate, you might also recall that Tumblr was purchased by Yahoo in 2013 for a sum of $1.1 billion, only to eventually be sold to WordPress Operator Automatic in 2019 for a reported amount of less than $3 million, after losing more than 30% of their users following the site-wide ban on pornography the previous December. Another less remembered but way more relevant example is Patreon's years-long struggle to support sex workers on their platform that has ultimately failed thanks to, you guessed it, payment partners. Because it turns out that even the cool, hip alt banks with the LaCroix bars and seaweed snacks and free ecstasy Fridays are still 100 years in the past when it comes to sex work. But hey, a little good news, because less than a week after announcing the impending ban on sexually explicit material, OnlyFans reversed their decision, saying that they had managed to come to an agreement with their banking partners, lest they lose a female-presenting tit mountain of cash and credibility. It was a small but welcome victory for sex workers and the normalization of their very old profession, but it's nowhere near the end of this saga against this financial cabal of finger-wagging weirdos who have been shitting in their sexy Wheaties for decades. Just let them sell their sexy Wheaties, guys! What are we doing here? If you took any one of these bank CEOs' masturbation sessions at random and judged it by the same puritanical metric they wield against sex workers, every one of them would be exiled to the moon. That is, of course, pointing to the magic word of this whole debacle. How stupendously sticky is the fact that out of all the people to moralize about pornography, it's the fucking bankers, an industry plagued with sex criminals. Now, we try not to lean too hard on the old Handmaid's Tale or the Wizard Boy Tales comparisons, but it's like straight out of the Handmaid's Tale, when all the moralizing Joseph Fiennes preach about harlots and indecency before slinking away into their little rape nightclub. And of course, it isn't just the banks. Jeff Toobin tugged on his hog rope in the middle of a Zoom work meeting at the New Yorker, which you may recognize as a thing that is actually against the law and normally earns you a lifetime ban from playgrounds and a permanent subheading on all of your business cards. But CNN gave that skin-fiddling horn balloon his job back after an 8-month suspension. 8 little months. Surely that's worse than grown-ups selling homemade pornography online to other grown-ups. And while I don't have the exact figures in front of me, I am positive no banks stopped doing business with CNN or the New Yorker. Like, really positive. Like, there's simply no way I've selected the false grail, so I'm not even going to ask the dust knight and suck that puppy off levels of positive. But apparently, selling sexually explicit material of yourself to consenting adult customers in a private transaction turns all of your money radioactive, leaving the banks no choice but to remove it lest it contaminate all of the respectable cash deposited by pharmaceutical companies charging $300 for a vial of insulin and landlords collecting $3,000 rent checks for an efficiency apartment in a windowless utility closet in Manhattan. Man, this country just hates sex. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.